All right, Michelle, do
All
you
right,
want to go ahead and
I'll start us off. So my name is Michelle Sigafus. I am the district testing coordinator. Before I was the district testing coordinator, I was a music teacher. And so I was often one of those secondary thought of people in these types of situations. And so we wanted to make sure that we found ways for Ex Ed people to be able to reach out to their students. And Daniel Sanchez, who is going to be flying the plane today, he's going to take you through all of the steps on how to use a PRA. And so I'm going to head it over to Daniel.
thanks, Michelle. So I'm Daniel Sanchez. I'll be primarily presenting to you during this session on a new SchoolCity feature called Personalized Review Assignments, or PRAs. Just a little bit of background on me. Prior to joining the assessment and evaluation team, as you see up here listed above me, I was a special education resource teacher for a number of years, primarily in the elementary grade levels. And so Michelle and I have quite the affinity for our sometimes loosely connected educators out there who aren't quite strongly connected to respective rosters of learners that we serve here. And this is even more evident in this transformative times with our online platforms that we have and we utilize, including places such as Clever, and sometimes even Zoom and other facets where we're still trying to creatively and innovatively keep our resource educators in that loop and connected. SchoolCity thankfully has some rostering logic in the system, in the platform, that creates such connections between you and learners. So we're gonna kind of go, and that's why we decided to choose the platform and just show you a potential resource that you may incorporate into your service for our learners with exceptional needs here. So that all said, let me just make a couple quick announcements. Just friendly note, this I'm sure was evident and already spelled out when you registered through True North Logic, but this is not a paid PD. You are being credited the time. We are asking you to copy and paste that attendance form link that Michelle is periodically adding to the chat thread so that you can get that formal verification confirmation of attendance that way. And we are having a what's been termed a lunch and learn. I kind of informally have dubbed it the School Lunch City time. We're actually having an hour of informal, open-ended, bring your lunch, bring your questions time about SchoolCity, more questions about PRAs and things like that. And we're going to have one of those and host it tomorrow through Zoom. It'll be tomorrow in the afternoon, 12 to 1. And we'll send out that calendar event invitation to you all. If you can make it or you're interested, feel free to. If not, feel free to decline it. It's fine. It's just an optional extra opportunity to have more of a dialogue, especially as you're going to be processing auditorily, visually what I present to you during the remainder of this session here. So that all said, let me go ahead and jump into this screen here. So just quick tech tips. Ideally, when you're going in the online and interacting with our learners who have that meaningful access on their end, we all want to be using browsers that are going to hold up, that are most compatible with these platforms that our district is using, the tools that we're using digitally. Chrome tends to be the go-to browser. It tends to be optimally suited for these needs, and that's certainly true for SchoolCity. It's not your only option, it's just it's a good one, and that's why it's recommended. So if you're using things like Edge or Safari, those things can still work out okay, but really Chrome would be most helpful for sure in terms of functionality and optimal environment there. So that said, when we're in Chrome, let me go ahead and show a few resources to you before we actually show the tool and the aspects and some of the technical things to train you up and get you started. We actually have a number of resources that we want to highlight to start with and that we'll reference at the end of this session. These resources can be accessed through the district's internet website, tusd1.org, within the staff page on the internet site. So this site, again, is accessible to you from home. You do not have to be within the district's network to access this site and these content that I'm going to share with you here. So a nice thing to note is within this staff page on tusd1.org, there's a quick links section. One link there that's helpful, and it's a quick link for you, is SchoolCity Staff Access. I'm not going to click here because I already have some tabs open, but this is one way you can locate your staff login page for that. Another one that I am going to take us to is towards the bottom here. It's called TUSD Assessment Resources on Office 365, or TAR is how we tend to refer to it. We just abbreviate it. It'll open in a OneNote, and that's essentially a digital notebook. What you'll see once it populates here on the left-hand column is the tabs or sections, and then the pages per section, followed by the page content, depending on your selections in these columns here. I'm actually going to go to the section called SchoolCity Help, and it'll default to the SchoolCity Help Documents page. And on this page, as a new resource, a link to resources specifically on this PRA feature. By clicking where it says click here from this page, it'll actually open up a folder of contents that you can access, including a PRA demo video. This demonstrates the features that I'm going to go over and describe and explain and answer your questions about during the session. But this video is about 8.5 minutes long. It'll be it'll be just a quick refresher, if you will, following this session. We also have developed these quick tips documents, a PRA quick tips for staff that again will summarize what I'm going to show and demonstrate with you this afternoon, and a PRA quick tips for students, something that you can reference or share out with students and their families to make sure that we're equipping them properly to have that meaningful access and engagement with these data-driven learning tools here. So on that note, I did want to say a few important things to note here. PRA is a data-driven learning tool, and it delivers staff-selected and staff-created online resources and or review questions in a gamified way. So it comes across in more of a gamified activity environment for students. I'll illustrate what that means once we're further along in this session here. But PRAs are linked to assessment data in SchoolCity, and they're linked through the standards that are assessed, or they can just be linked in general to assessments as challenge activities in the PRAs. PRAs are assigned based on students' performance on the assessment. Again, when it's assessing standards and we know what standards are being assessed, it can be based on their performance per each standard assessed. And finally, any students with linked assessment data may access these PRAs. More specifically, any students who are rostered to you, with whom you're linked to in SchoolCity. So let's venture into SchoolCity now. I'm just going to go ahead and open my tab, but like I said, it was a quick link. You can always just Google SchoolCity TUSD staff. Whenever you find these websites, including the login, I would recommend that you just bookmark that. It's going to streamline it, and that you'd likewise give these same tech tips, pay that forward to our families and our students. Let them know, use Chrome, use the bookmarks. This will just really reduce the potential pitfalls that create frustration for folks and become unintentional barriers to the kinds of access we're trying to provide for them. So this is a logged into account. You need to make sure that you likewise, each of you can log into SchoolCity. If you can't log into SchoolCity, you can't access these PRA tools. And so that's something you want to make sure you can. If anything ever comes up with your SchoolCity account, there's a general help email, schoolcityhelp@tusd1.org, or you can directly email me, daniel.sanchez@tusd1.org, or even Michelle ms.sigafus@tsd1.org. Either way, we'll be happy to help you with things like that. Once you are logged into your SchoolCity account, you end up in this logged in screen that's called the Launchpad here. Let me pause before I go any further in, just to make sure and double check. Are there any questions that you had either already splashed on the chat or that you'd like to ask right now?
We currently don't have any that are splashed on chat.
And that's fine. And like I said before, we're a small enough group here. I think it can work. If you see something, you hear something, it wasn't quite clear, feel free to just unmute and chime in at that point. Or like I said, put it on the chat and we'll pause again to check on questions to make sure we're all on the same page, moving collectively through this.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Is there SchoolCity has assignments or lesson plan we can use?
SchoolCity is mainly an assessment and data tool. And this feature itself will allow you to link out to some activities or content, but it won't be packaged. It won't be as restrictive or prescriptive as saying this is a full-on scope and sequence or full-on all your components of a lesson plan. Yeah. It'll have various aspects or elements. And truth be told, this feature, as I go further through, you may see potential ways that you can create or utilize it in conjunction with some of your lesson plans or other lesson plans from our curriculum and instruction department, or others that you may have come across, other resources too.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So once we're in this page, I just want to point out, if you're relatively new to SchoolCity, everybody lands on this page called the Launchpad up here. And everyone will see something that looks sort of like this. These are called flip cards. Pardon me? These are called flip cards, but they might not always be the same colors in the same order or the same ones that are visible on this screen, because these are all customizable through this little gear button here. Everyone will have this solid blue bar once you log in as a staff. And along the right-hand side, what you should note is your name and your role, your default role. Everyone here in this audience will likely have the role that says Ex Ed. Now, it may be the case that you don't have that role. You might have a role that says teacher, which is most likely when you are a self-contained teacher and you have a class of students, just a class roster, or teach a few periods, and that's your linkage to them. Or you may have a role that's called school, and that basically gives you school level role permissions, and it links you to the school's roster of students. Ex Ed and school roles are basically synonymous. They function similarly with very similar role permissions. They're both school level roles. And if you're wondering at this point, well, how do I know which students I'm linked to? Who are the kids I'm rostered to? You can verify that and check by going through this universal click pathway up here, either clicking on the blue word that says Launchpad or this grid, and it will reveal to you the different modules that you have access to within this role that you have assigned to you. I'm going to go to reports from here, and within reports, it lands by default on this tab that's highlighted. It's called predefined, with a list of possible automatically generated data reports once data is collected on assessments. We'll go and revisit this a little bit in just a moment, but I want to first answer the question of, well, how do I know which students I'm rostered to? There's this tab right next to it called class roster. If I click there, it will, for one, it will automatically let me know when was the last date and time of the roster upload. These rosters are uploaded every night, and they come directly from Synergy. So they reflect whatever Synergy's class rostering is and enrollments are, and they flow and push into SchoolCity nightly. You may or may not see all of the listed filters that are visible on this screen. It would really depend on your role. Some may or may not have grade if that's not something you can filter to or need to based on your role, but just about everyone should see course and definitely period filters here. As a teacher, which I'm in a teacher's role here, I can just simply refresh and it'll then populate and show me a table of my students in all the periods I teach. I'm in a fake 5th grade teacher account, so we're seeing these fake 5th grade students, but the structure is very similar to what you'll see. And this particular page has a few other features. I won't go too much into them. I just want to point out that you can control for things such as, let's say that you're an Ex Ed resource teacher and you find out, wow, I'm rostered to all the kinder through 5th grade students at my elementary school, as an example. You can check, locate, search for with matric or first or last name here, check one or more boxes of students and create a student group. This feature, student groups, allows you to have a very specific subgroup of the big roster that you're linked to, so you could operate in terms of creating and delivering assessments just to that group of learners specific to what you're working with them on. Could be goal-oriented assessments. You can review data and filter down to bigger data sets just for that subgroup and compare that subgroup performance to the rest of the roster that took that particular assessment. So and you can flexibly group students. It's not a one-time thing, a one and done. They'll forever be in this group. They're in there as long as they're part of your roster, and if new kids join your caseload, you can go in and add them. I'll show you where to be able to find more resources to help you learn about student groups, because that's its own feature in this system here. But you can also do things like check multiple boxes or click individual buttons under the functions key, this capital A with the little superscript A by it, or just this button to update accommodations. It allows you to preset certain accommodation profiles. We're talking specifically about testing accommodation, online testing tools. These tools include things like color contrast, text-to-speech, magnifiers. These are tools that are very specific to and exclusive to the assessments in SchoolCity, specifically the online assessments in SchoolCity. The PRA feature is a data-driven learning tool that, while it's linked to assessments, it's not in the same environment as these assessments, so it doesn't have the same functions as online assessments. Specifically, it will not include these online accommodation or testing tools. So that's something just to note about the PRA. So that can help us answer our question of who am I linked to in this system? And now I want to go into one of the access points to access the PRA and demonstrate setting up the PRA. I'm going to go in through the data side. The PRA is a pretty dynamic tool, a lot of customizations in it that allow you to access it for one, either through any of your predefined reports. I'm just going to arbitrarily choose test results. And for any predefined report that you have data for, you'll always see the universal icon for the PRA to access that setup screen. It's a blue button. I call it the blue gear head, and it's essentially a silhouette or outline of a head with gears in it. Now, one thing to note is when you're going through the data side, you've collected the data, they've taken the assessments, and now you're going to most likely, best practice would be, I'm going to review some of this data and do some quick analysis or use some of the help of other available reports such as item or standards analysis to help me really key in on which standards I want to support. When you go in through the data report side, you also need to just make sure things to verify and note are you're looking at your current roster and that the assessment that you want to link the PRAs to is listed here. When that's not the case, you can start to change the assessment starting with clicking on that button there. But this does happen to be the assessment that I want to link my PRAs to. This is a 5th grade reading and literature standard 2 highly leveraged formative assessment. And we'll see where the description for this code is, but it's essentially about comprehending themes within literature and different text types of literature. That HL, again, is the abbreviation for highly leveraged standards, which our district uses categories of standards that prioritizes them differently. And one of those indicators is highly leveraged, or HL standards. This particular assessment, just FYI, is a pre-made district assessment. The district developed and created at least one highly leveraged formative assessment with very short, sweet, usually 3 to 5 questions long, with varied questions with one typed response, teacher scored question in each one of these assessments. They made one per highly leveraged standard in ELA and math from grades 2 through 8, all quarters this year. So those assessments are pre-made, they're in there. And there is another help document in the TAR that I'll point out at the tail end if you're even more curious about this particular resource here.